The year is 1499, and along the wind-battered cliffs of Modin in the Peloponnese, church bell rings for the last time. Inside the stone walls of the convent of St. Theodora, 23 women kneel in morning prayer, their voices rising together in Latin hymns they have sung every dawn for years. But on this particular morning, May 17, 1499, the words taste different on their tongues, like ash and iron and farewell. Abbess Helena, who has led these women for 14 years, clutches a silver crucifix worn smooth by 3 generations of faithful hands. Her fingers tremble not from fear but from certainty, because beyond those ancient walls, the horizon burns red with the banners of Sultan Bayezid II's advancing army. The Ottoman forces do not simply march across conquered lands, they flow like an unstoppable tide of steel and fire, methodically erasing everything that came before. What the women of St. Theodora cannot yet know, what history has deliberately buried beneath centuries of carefully maintained silence, is that a swift death might have been the greatest mercy they could hope for. What happens next will not appear in your history textbooks. It was systematically erased, hidden away in forgotten archives, deliberately excluded from the official chronicles of empires. To understand the machine that is about to consume these women, we must step back 17 years to 1453, when Constantinople fell after holding for over 1,000 years. The jewel of Eastern Christendom collapsed in just 53 days of relentless cannon fire and bloodshed. The great Hagia Sophia, once the most magnificent cathedral in the Christian world, was stripped of its crosses within hours of the city's fall. Byzantine mosaics were plastered over, church bells melted down for cannon metal, and within a single week, the Islamic call to prayer echoed where Orthodox hymns had resonated for 9 centuries. Sultan Muhammad II, grandfather to Bayezid, had stood in that vast nave and declared it a mosque, not because the empire needed another house of worship, but because he understood something most conquerors never grasp. You do not truly defeat a people by killing them, you defeat them by erasing who they are, by obliterating their identity so thoroughly that even memory becomes uncertain. The Ottoman strategy was never about simple massacre. Massacres create martyrs, and martyrs inspire resistance. Songs are written about them, legends grow around their sacrifice, and the dead become more powerful than they ever were in life. The Ottomans had perfected something far more insidious, a method that leaves no songs, no stories, no collective memory to rally around. They perfected erasure. By 1499, this dark strategy had been tested and refined across the empire's expanding territories. Greek monasteries scattered throughout the Peloponnese, Serbian convents hidden in Balkan valleys, Armenian churches clinging to Anatolian hillsides, all had faced the same systematic approach. Some were forcibly converted into mosques, others simply abandoned to crumble into dust. But the pattern remained chillingly consistent. First came an offer that sounded almost reasonable, then came an assault so complete it was as if these communities had never existed at all. The convent of St. Theodora, perched on its remote hilltop far from any military garrison, was about to become another experiment in this cruel science of cultural annihilation. But these 23 women were not merely statistics to be recorded in some imperial ledger. They were not soldiers trained for combat. Their only weapons were wooden rosary beads worn smooth by countless prayers. Their only armor was an unshakable faith that would soon be tested beyond anything they could imagine. Most had never even seen an armed soldier up close, never held a blade, never dreamed they would need to prepare for what was coming. Abbess Helena had entered religious life after the plague swept through her village in 1480. Taking everyone she loved, she had sought the convent not to hide from the world's cruelty but to try and make some sense of it. Sister Theodosia, barely 19 years old, still bore the calluses of farm work on her young hands. She had taken her vows only 2 years earlier, after raiders destroyed her family's village and left her with nowhere else to turn. Sister Kyra, 70 years old, had already survived to abysses the fall of an emperor, and countless wars that had washed over these lands like recurring nightmares. She had long ago stopped fearing death itself, but none of them, not even ancient Sister Kyra, had ever faced anything like what was about to happen. The first cannonball strikes just after dawn on May 18th, and the sound is absolutely apocalyptic. The bell tower, which has called the faithful to prayer for 200 years, explodes in a shower of ancient stone and twisted iron. The great bronze bell shatters mid-swing, fragments raining down onto the courtyard where the sisters once grew medicinal herbs to tend the sick from surrounding villages. By midday on May 18, 1499, the convent gates have been smashed open. But what pours into the courtyard is not what the sisters expected. The Ottoman soldiers enter not with swords drawn and bloody intent, but with ledgers, quills, and pots of dark ink. They move with the cold efficiency of clerks and accountants rather than warriors drunk on conquest. To the Ottoman administrative system, these women represent valuable assets to be catalogued and processed, not enemies to be slaughtered. A translator steps forward, a Greek man who knows these hills and speaks the local dialect. His voice shakes with barely concealed shame as he reads from an official scroll bearing the Sultan's seal. By the decree of Sultan Bazid II, all subjects within newly conquered territories must submit to imperial authority. Those who convert to Islam will receive protection and certain privileges. Those who refuse will face the inevitable consequences of open rebellion against the Sultan's divine authority. Abbess Helena steps forward with a face so calm it seems almost serene, as if she has already moved beyond fear into some realm of pure conviction. She speaks not to the armed soldiers but directly to the trembling translator, her Greek so clear and measured that everyone present understands perfectly. Tell your Sultan that we gave our lives to a different king long ago. We have absolutely nothing left to surrender to earthly powers. The officer commanding this operation, Hassan Pasha, whose name appears in Ottoman military campaign records from the 1499 Modern Offensive, does not respond with anger or violence. Instead, a chilling smile crosses his weathered face, disturbing precisely because he knows something these women do not yet understand. The Ottoman Empire has perfected the devastating art of breaking human spirits without creating martyrs, of destroying faith without spilling blood that might inspire future resistance. That same night, the women are locked inside their own chapel, the sacred space where they have prayed together for years now, transformed into a prison. No food arrives, no water is provided, only suffocating darkness and the sound of soldiers outside laughing, eating, and living ordinary lives while the nuns wait to discover who among them will break first under this pressure. Two of the youngest sisters, girls who had joined from a nearby coastal village, begin weeping in the corner, their sobs echoing off stone walls that have absorbed centuries of prayers. But Sister Theodosia, barely 20 years old, begins whispering a psalm into the darkness. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Then another joins her. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. One by one, the sobbing stops as ancient words of comfort spread through the darkness. The Ottoman soldiers had badly underestimated their captives. These were women who had spent their entire adult lives preparing for suffering through fasting, through night vigils in freezing cold, through hours of maintained silence, through constant submission to something far greater than themselves. What the soldiers intended as torture, the nuns experienced as merely another form of the spiritual discipline they had practiced for years. But Hassan Pasha has seen this kind of resistance before in Greek monasteries throughout the Peloponnese, in Serbian convents hidden in mountain valleys, in Armenian churches scattered across Anatolia. He knows that faith burns brightest in the moments just before it finally dies. On the second day of their imprisonment, the chapel doors open and a servant enters carrying fresh bread and clean water, real sustenance after a day and night of deprivation. He sets it down without speaking a single word and withdraws. The famished nuns stare at the food while their throats burn with thirst and their stomachs cramp with hunger. The younger sisters look desperately to Abyssa Helena for guidance. Sister Kyra, the eldest, speaks first in a voice rough with thirst. They want us to take it, to feel gratitude toward them, to begin softening. Helena nods slowly. Then we fast. They do not touch the food or water. By the third day their lips have cracked and begun bleeding. Their hands shake uncontrollably. The younger sisters can barely stand without support from their companions. But they do not break. Hassan Pasha watches from the courtyard with arms crossed, simultaneously impressed, frustrated, and perhaps feeling an unwanted flicker of respect for their extraordinary resilience. On the morning of the fourth day, the doors open again, but this time Hassan himself enters. He speaks in Turkish while the translator follows like a shadow. You are not criminals. You are not even our enemies. You are simply mistaken in your stubborn devotion. The Sultan is famously merciful. He offers you new lives, new names, imperial protection. Simply speak the words of conversion, or agree to come with us to Constantinople where the Sultan himself will hear your case. Perhaps your evident conviction will move him to clemency. He pauses deliberately. The road to Constantinople is very long. The weak do not survive such journeys. This is not a threat. It is simply a promise based on experience. Helena looks at her sisters, some barely conscious, some praying with eyes squeezed shut, some staring at stone floors seeking strength. She turns back to Hassan. We will walk wherever you take us. That disturbing smile returns to his face. Good, we depart at dawn. On May 22nd, 1499. 23 women begin walking south toward the coast with their hands bound, moving along dusty roads beneath a merciless sun. No carts are provided, no horses offered, only their blistered feet, choking dust, and the burning sky pressing down. By the second day of forced marching, Sister Irene, 62 years old, collapses when her knees finally fail. Two other nuns lift her between them and carry her struggling body for 3 agonizing miles. That night she falls unconscious. By morning, Sister Irene is dead. They bury her with their bound hands while whispering hurried prayers. Hassan Pasha notes dispassionately in his leather-bound ledger that 22 remain. On the fourth day of marching, it happens again when Sister Callista, who has not spoken since the siege began, simply sits down in the middle of the dusty road and closes her eyes. They are forced to leave her there. By the 7th day, when they finally reach the Mediterranean port of Modin, only 18 women remain alive. But something unexpected has occurred during this brutal march. The nuns have stopped weeping and begging. They walk in profound silence now, not the silence of defeat, but of women who have already made their final choice and found strange peace in that acceptance. If stories of forgotten resilience like this matter to you, if you believe that voices deliberately erased from history deserve to be heard again, then please subscribe and help resurrect these lost testimonies. Every subscription ensures that someone remembers. Now, let's continue to where this dark journey truly leads, to a faith that history tried desperately to bury. Sister Helena still leads from the front, despite her bound hands. On the morning of the 7th day, Hassan summons her to his tent alone. What occurs inside is not recorded in any Ottoman military document. It survives only in a Venetian merchant's letter discovered in 2003 within the Dubrovnik archives, a faded account that makes your blood run cold. The merchant wrote that he saw them bring Helena back at dawn, and she could no longer walk on her own. Her eyes were open, but she was not present inside them anymore. They dressed her in fine silk and paraded her through the military camp as evidence of a successful conversion. But the merchant passed close enough to hear her lips still moving soundlessly. She was praying in Latin. She had not broken inwardly. They had taken her body, but her soul remained untouched, wandering somewhere they could not reach. This was the true Ottoman strategy that history books deliberately avoid teaching. They did not want to create martyrs whose deaths would inspire future resistance. They wanted to create ghosts, women who would walk, eat, and breathe but never be whole again, living proof that rebellion against imperial power was utterly futile. At the port, the 18 surviving women are loaded onto a galley, not a passenger vessel but a ship specifically designed for transporting slaves, prisoners, and human cargo. The nuns are chained to wooden benches with their wrists locked to iron rings. A ship's manifest discovered in 1987 in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace. Museum lists them not by their Christian names but simply by number. Religious captives, female, 18. Destination listed as imperial household. Purpose stated as domestic service and conversion. That bureaucratic word service conceals horrors the official record will never acknowledge. The voyage lasts 12 days of hell. Violent storms lash the deck. Salt spray stings their cracked, bleeding lips. The ship pitches and rolls sickeningly. Women who have never seen the ocean before vomit until there is absolutely nothing left inside them. Night. Young Sister Theodosia whispers psalms beneath her breath. Sound so faint they are almost lost against the crashing waves. But other prisoners chained nearby. Greeks, Serbs, Italians, men and women who have also lost everything turn their heads to listen. For brief moments, the raging sea seems to grow still. When the ship finally enters the Bosphorus Strait, the sisters see Constantinople rising before them, a city of gleaming domes, soaring minarets and walls that seem to stretch toward infinity. The city gleams in the early light like a perfectly sharpened blade. For centuries, it had been called the city of the world's desire. Now it will become their final cage. From the docks, they march through narrow streets lined with merchants, soldiers, and slave markets. People stop their business to stare because Christian nuns among captive populations are genuinely rare, even in an empire built entirely on continuous conquest. They are led past ancient walls, through the imperial district, past gardens where ornate fountains sing and peacocks scream. Then, in the long shadow cast by Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral that is now a mosque, they are forced to kneel. As the Islamic call to prayer echoes from the minarets, one sister whispers bitterly, "We have come home, but it is no longer ours." They are taken into Topkapi Palace, but not to the grand halls where ambassadors conduct delicate negotiations and viziers conspire over matters of state. They are led down stone steps that spiral into absolute darkness, through damp tunnels that smell of decay and centuries of secrets, to a place that officially does not exist in any palace record. During 2011 restoration work, archaeologists broke through what they assumed was just another storage room wall. What they discovered on the other side froze them in place. Scratches covered the hidden stone walls, barely visible after 5 centuries. Dozens of crude crosses, clearly made with fingernails or sharp fragments of broken pottery. Beneath those crosses, 4 words carefully carved in Latin, Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. This had been their secret chapel. For months, possibly years, these 18 women lived beneath the palace, working as silent servants during daylight hours, scrubbing floors, washing linens, tending fires for rooms they would never be permitted to enter. But at night, after the vast palace finally slept, they gathered in this forgotten chamber to pray. No priest could guide them. No altar existed. No Bible was available. Only memory. They recited psalms by heart, verses half forgotten and reshaped into desperate prayers for survival. They whispered hymns so faintly the stone barely caught the sound. They held communion using bread stolen from kitchens and water drawn from palace wells. And they carved their faith into stone one scratch at a time, knowing absolutely no one would ever see it. Sister Theodosia became their voice in the darkness, the girl who had whispered psalms on the ship, who had helped carry Sister Irene on that brutal march, who had refused to look away when they dressed Abbess Helena in silk after whatever happened in Hassan's tent. Archaeologists found her mark scratched into the corner of the wall, a small bird. Beside it, 23 carefully drawn lines, one for each sister who had walked out of the convent of St. Theodora, but only 11 lines were complete. The rest trailed off into nothing, fading away like lives extinguished one by one. Ottoman records from 1505 mention only a routine cleansing of palace staff under a new sultan. Anyone deemed unproductive or persistently resistant to conversion was removed. No details are provided, no names recorded, no burial sites marked, just one bloodless line in an administrative ledger. Disposed, the nuns of Modin vanished completely from history. 18 women who had walked 7 days through hell, crossed the sea in chains, and carved prayers into stone in absolute darkness, gone, but their chapel remained, waiting. In 2011, when archaeologists examined that hidden room more carefully, they found traces of wax on the stone floor. Not from standard Ottoman candles but older wax mixed with herbs, exactly the type nuns had made in medieval convents. They had kept their vigil far longer than anyone imagined possible. Months, maybe years, gathering in darkness, carving crosses, whispering prayers, absolutely refusing to disappear even as they were systematically erased. Sister Theodosia's bird was the last mark made on the wall. Beside it, scratched so faintly it is almost invisible, 2 words in Greek: we endure. The Ottoman Empire lasted until 1922, over 400 years of conquest and power. Yet in the end, it was those desperate scratches on hidden stone that survived, not the Sultan's grand decrees, not Hassan Pasha's careful ledgers, not the silk they dressed Sister Helena in to parade her broken body as proof of conversion. Just words and marks carved by women the world had deliberately forgotten. Lux in tenebris lucide. The light shines in the darkness. Those words, taken from the Gospel of John, speak of light that cannot be extinguished, of truth that survives even when everything else has been taken away. Sister Theodosia carved them, knowing she would never leave the palace alive, knowing her name would be forgotten, knowing the world would move on without ever acknowledging what happened in that darkness. Yet she carved them anyway, understanding something that empires built on force and fear never comprehend. You can conquer land, rewrite official histories, erase names from administrative ledgers, bury bodies in unmarked graves, but you cannot kill what people carry inside them, and you cannot silence what they carve into stone with bleeding fingers in the dark. You have just witnessed one of history's most deliberately buried truths. These 18 women, whose names we will never fully know, whose faces no portrait preserves, chose faith over survival and left marks that outlasted an empire. In the comments below, share what this story means to you. In a world that still tries to erase inconvenient voices, how do we ensure that the forgotten are finally remembered? How do we become the ones who break through false walls and bring hidden truths back into the light?